Hello, everyone. This is Mike Fuda with Microsoft. Thanks for joining our Microsoft Teams Empower Hour around broadcasting live events. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you're joining us from today. I see we've got about just over 200 folks attending, with more coming in. So we want to make this an impactful hour for you. Again, today we're going to go over the whole notion of using Microsoft Teams to broadcast a live event. And I'm joined today by two of my colleagues. Mornay Pretorius is one of our Teams customer program managers with Teams Engineering. And again, my name's Mike Fuda. I'm a customer success manager. I help customers with their adoption of Microsoft Teams. And I've got Kevin Wright, one of my colleagues, who is working behind the scenes on our Q&A panel, also helping with the event. Hey, Mornay, can we go to the next slide, please? All right, folks, so here's what we want to do in the agenda today. So first of all, I want to kind of position for everyone, really, how does live events for Microsoft Teams fit into the overall meeting spectrum? And we'll go over and kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about through the rest of the session. And then I'm going to pass the baton over to Mornay to really explore the service deeply about what you really need to know to begin with live events, how to schedule one, how to produce one. And today we're actually running this event on a live event. So you're all becoming experts in attending an event. We want to talk about the perspective of the different roles, what you should have ready for the attendees that are going to be part of your live event. And throughout this whole session, both within the Q&A panel and throughout our conversation, we really want to share with you best practices. And if we don't say it once, we'll say it again. You want to practice. This is a little different than a regular Teams meeting. So you're going to want to practice running a couple of these first before you really do a live event. So in the meeting spectrum, let's talk about where live events fits. So for those of you that are using Teams today or just starting with Teams, you're familiar with point-to-point meetings and conversations and chat. So Microsoft Teams is the successor to Skype. You've probably used Skype for chat, and you certainly have used email and other collaboration tools from Microsoft like SharePoint to share content. Well, Teams is our new platform for all of those things. And you're using Teams today for those one-to-one or one-to-many chats and conversations and content sharing. Today, Teams scales up to 250 participants in a meeting. So if you have a meeting in Teams, everyone's an equal presenter. Everyone has presenter rights and attendee rights inside of a meeting in Teams. What we're really going to be talking about today, though, is going beyond that kind of regular Teams experience you're having that you know and are getting very familiar with, and talking about going broader. So if you need to have more control in the scenario, and you're going to have scenarios like a town hall by one of your executives, or you want to do a one-to-many training session, webinar style like we're doing today, that's where Teams live events comes in as a solution for you. So again, think about where you need to have more management over the attendee experience. This is where a live event fits into that meeting spectrum. And next slide, please, Mornay. Right. So some of the other characteristics that we'll want to share, around this one-to-many event, right? Think about where it has to be structured. In this event today, we've got a Q&A panel, which is something different than you're seeing inside a regular Teams event. You've got chat for everybody posting questions. We have kind of a structured Q&A panel inside. And also, in the different roles, some of us can speak and present and share. Everyone else as an attendee is that experience of an attendee consuming the content. The other things to note is that live events in Teams can also utilize Yammer with going beyond and having questions and conversation posted before and after a live event. So we work in concert with Yammer, if you choose to do so, to have a live event from a beginning and then a live event, and then a Yammer experience afterwards. So do keep in mind, you can even take this further than we're going to talk about today by leveraging Yammer. And behind the scenes, Microsoft Stream is powering the content and the video and the audio. So this recording afterwards becomes part of Stream, and then you can take action upon that recording where you want that to go and what your audience is. So some important things to call out for today to just make sure you know. In a standard Teams meeting, we can have up to 250 people collaborating together in a Teams meeting. So if you've ever been a part of a Teams meeting where it's getting up, past 50 or 70 folks, and some people aren't coming off a mute, right? You've got different experiences with everyone having equal rights in that Teams meetings. It is a truly collaborative space. We want everybody to have that same role within that team meeting. Well, with live events, we can scale up to 10,000 folks joining this in that town hall webinar style live event. So that's a difference in the scale. Teams meetings are meant to be everyone's an equal citizen, and where Teams live events comes in that's where we can really scale to the power of many folks. So, Renee, I'm going to turn it over to you to take it from here.
Great, thank you, Michael. Yeah, so as Michael spoke, right, these live events are typically Excel or hyperscale events, typically high quality. You spend a lot more time certainly thinking around preparing content and running of the event there. And so it's very important to understand that different from a traditional meeting, which is pretty much just ad hoc or scheduled, there's a fair amount of preparation that you want to put into producing these live events. And so it's important for us to explain to you quickly just what those roles are when you're thinking through putting together your own live event, right? And so the first role really is the organizer, right? So think of this person as your PA, or you even personally going into Teams and actually scheduling a Teams live event, right? So a predefined role inside of the live event ecosystem, right? And then two other very important roles, right? One being the producer and one being the moderator, right? So right now in today's live event, Michael is actually playing the role of the producer, and Kevin, his peer, is actually playing the role of the moderator, right? So very important that as I think through scheduling this particular event, I want to pay attention to, who's organizing this, who will be producing the event, and who is going to help me with Q&A, right, throughout the event. Certainly for very, very small events, you would find that a singular person could be the organizer, the producer, as well as the moderator. But when we get to hyperscale, super large meetings, we certainly need more staff to help us on the event. And you'll see a second little window drawn out right behind the first window, and that is in terms of a best practice, right? So once again, if I'm running a 10,000 way, say CEO town hall or otherwise, I may want to have two producers, right, or two moderators, right? So certainly for these high value, high impact events, we want to make sure we build some resiliency into the service, right? And then the other important role in as far as live events is concerned is obviously the presenters, right? So you can invite multiple presenters into a live event, and typically these folk would be from your organization, and they would contribute audio and video and content much the same way that Michael and I and the team are doing today, right? And then finally, on the right-hand side, we have the attendees, which is you today, right? And these attendees would be one of those 10,000 folk joining this meeting through either Teams, Yammer, or Stream, through either the embedded Teams client on your desktop, or using your web client, or using the mobile. So really important that kind of as I think through the meeting, I'm always paying attention to who's my scheduler, who's my producer, who's my moderator, and who are my presenters for the meeting. So what I want to do quickly is just kind of walk you through how to schedule a live event within Microsoft Teams. And so we'll quickly break out from here into the Teams client, And so if I click on the calendar icon on the left-hand side of my Teams client, you'll see it actually opens up the calendar view. And then when I mouse to the right-hand side, I drop down the new meeting dialog and click on live event, right? And so you'll notice there's a small little icon here or picture that depicts that this is a special type of Teams meeting, right? This is live event. And over here, I would just give this specific live event a name. So let's just call this the Teams. Give me a second while I put my mouse there. Teams live event power hour as an example, right? And I can declare a location. I can provide a start time and end time. I can select the time zone and provide more details, but more about that a little later. What's important on the right-hand side, if we just recall a second ago, we spoke about producers and presenters. This is where I would set up those roles within my meeting invite. And so in my case over here, I would just go and add Michael or one of my colleagues, right, as a presenter inside of this specific event. And let me go add a few more there. All right, and there we go. And you can see over here, very easy for me to go and update their role to either presenter or co-producer inside of a Teams live event. Now, once I've set the audience, so as I schedule the meeting, I've settled on my producers, I've settled on my presenters, I now need to go and set the environment up, right? And so very important when you configure a Teams live event, you can scope the audience, right? So I can certainly scope the audience of a live event to a group of users within my organization, right? Or I can actually scope the live event to the organization, right? So you as the customer can actually host an internal only hyperscale meeting to every single one of your employees, right? So think of that as a secure webinar that you would host internally. And then finally, what we're doing today is public, right? So public is where I can now include external, non-employees, right? You know, folk that don't belong to my organization. I can include them as meeting attendees, right? So this is how I would scope whether the event is selective to my entire organization or to the public. And then very important, as I design or customize the event there, you'll notice a couple of services that are made available on a per live event basis. And number one, recording, right? So certainly, Michael spoke about this before. For those folk that cannot attend the meeting live, they may actually want to go back to this event sometime in the future and then play back the recording, right? And so this is kind of where I would control the availability of the recording post the event. And then the other important item over here is captioning, right? So live event provides closed captioning of the speaker within live event, right? So as Michael and I and the teams, as we spoke into this event, if we turned on captioning, you would actually see a closed captioning of the presenters inside of live event as the attendee. And then very importantly, I can also select up to 6 different languages for translation, right? So if you plan to host a large Teams live event and potentially some of your the audience speaks another language, right? So maybe English isn't their first language. You can actually have the service include the translation of the captioning into up to 6 different languages, right? So for demonstration purposes, I'll select Dutch as an example, French, maybe German, and a handful of others, right? And so at meeting time, when these attendees now join your live event, they can both select to enable closed captioning and also have those translated into a language of their choice. The other important thing to bear in mind, right, if we move a little further down, is the attendee engagement report, right? So very important for the producer, right, or for the organization, is to measure attendance post the event, right? So in terms of the meeting's life cycle. So at the end of a live event, we provide you with a report that you can export into Excel or otherwise that'll actually capture those users that joined your meeting, right? You know, who the person was, where did they connect from, what device did they use when joining the meeting. And then another very important element of live event is Q&A, right? So Q&A, this is how I, as the producer and presenter within live event, are able to interact with the audience, right? So we'll show you in a second how we surface Q&A in both the producer, right, the production stage, as well as the attendee experience. Now, if you don't wish to present the actual event in live event, you do, in Teams, you do have the ability to actually connect a custom third-party encoder, right? So if your AV department today already has an in-house production system, and maybe they're using their own mixing hardware, and they're using one or two software encoders, then you can certainly integrate those into live event as well. And we'll share a bit more about that towards the end of today's session, right? So let's go and schedule this meeting. And once this live event is scheduled, you'll see that we provide two links. The link at the top is the attendee link, right? So this is the link that you will share with the external audience, right? So if I click on that, it'll actually copy that specific link to my clipboard, and I would then send that link out to the audience. I could send that via a calendar invite. I could send that by embedding that link, on my public web page or otherwise, right? A variety of ways for you to go and publish and advertise this specific live event, right? And then the bottom invitation, that is specific to the producers, the presenters, and the moderators for your specific live event, right? So let me jump back here quickly. So I did just want to jump onto one item there, and this is the invitation I spoke of, right? So when we talk about formatting the attendee invites, here you can see a simple Outlook view. We've provided a heading there. We could include the attendees, when the event starts, when the event stops, provide some information about the event, and then provide a simple link. You can see over here, broadcast link, watch live event, a simple URL for the external audience to join a meeting. And that's pretty much it, right? That's the entire scheduling experience for a live event scheduled within Teams. Now, what I want to do now is take you through the production view, right? So very importantly, the previous role was pretty much the scheduler or the organizer. I now want to provide you with a view of the user interface for the producer of a live event, right? So very important, not the organizer, not the presenters, but the producer, right? And so the producer, when the event goes live, would open up their calendar, right? They would click on the meeting and then would join the meeting button over here, right? The join button. And once they do that, they're actually taken to the Teams client. And what they can do is, prior to the event, they can customize. They can select their own microphone. They can select the video camera and customize their environment. And then they simply go and join the live event. And so if I look at this over here, let's quickly walk through this UI to give you an idea of what you're looking at, right? So in the bottom, right at the bottom, we actually have the video rail, right? So this is where all my presenters would come in, right? So if I had multiple video feeds from multiple presenters and I had some shared content, then all my presenters, right, would actually be in the lower rail. And so the producer would be able to select from those video feeds, from those cameras, and actually bring them into the meeting, right? Just above that, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a queue. And on the right-hand side is live event, right? So think of the queue as how we line up content, how we queue content for live event, right? So if I wanted to bring Daniela, who's the video feed at the bottom, into the live feed, I would place her in the queue, and then from the queue, I would promote her into the live event, right? And obviously, the window on the right-hand side, once the meeting starts, that actually represents the live feed. That's the feed that your audience would see, right? All the audio, all the video, all the content that the producer puts together for you would be shared and is viewable in that specific pane, right? Now, on this particular view over here, we've highlighted the Q&A, right? So in purple there, you'll notice the Q&A is open button, right? And when I mouse over to the next page, you'll see here, in this case, Daniela is going to be the moderator for today. And you can see how she's actually welcoming the attendees for today's event with a short message. And she's advising them that the meeting will start shortly. And so this is how the moderator in live event will actually handle all those inbound questions from the field, right? So as attendees ask questions, those questions surface on the incoming alert over here on the left-hand side, and then the moderator or moderators are able to look at those questions, read them through, obviously, and then answer back, the audience member. And they also have the ability of actually sharing that question more broadly with the entire live event audience, if that's desired, right? So very simple UI for you to interact and take questions from the audience. Now, you can see over here, what we're doing right now is we're actually going to walk you through setting up and starting a live event. And so in this case, you can see Danielle has shared out her desktop. We simply clicked on the desktop icon and we promoted the shared content into the queue. And once I'm ready, obviously, I will click on Send Live right under the queue panel. And then you can see my content is now ready to go live. So right now, if I were to click on Start, the first item the audience would see is they would hear our voice, right? They would hear all the audio, and they would see this shared desktop, right? And so when I click Start, there we go, live event in progress, right? So a very simple UI for the producer to handle multiple input streams and bring them into the meeting. Now, this particular UI provides you with a lot of detail and a lot of comfort, right? So first and foremost, notice how the border around the live event has gone red. So this is a visual indication now that the live event is actually live, right? And if I look to the left, just above the queue window, you'll see there is a small red dot. So this indicates that the meeting is being actively recorded, right? So as a producer, comforting, the event has started, recording is working, we're good to go, right? You'll also see the amount of time that the event has been running. And then we also provide this live view of the number of attendees that are in this specific live event, right? So this will actually real time surface to the producer the number of attendees in this meeting. And then once again, a nice little live button there just to kind of reinforce the fact that, hey, folk, we're live now. This is a live professional presentation right now. I do want to just draw your attention right to the top of the window. You'll see by default, all live events run for 4 hours. So this does provide you with guidance around kind of how far along you are. You can run these live events for 4 hours. And so, always keep that in mind when you create these webinars or send out these invitations. On the next screen over here, just a simplified view of the producer, right? So this is a producer right in the event right now. Once again, multiple video feeds at the bottom of the pane, right? There we have Amanda, we have Babek, and we have Daniela. We have some content, and then if we look at this particular view over here, we'll see that Babek is actually live right now, right? So the audience sees Babek, and we know that in a second, right, the producer is actually going to switch in the Amanda's desktop into the event there. And then just to reemphasize the previous point, look over here now at the attendee count, right? So in this case, we have 3,333 attendees inside of this live event. Another important element of this specific service, right, for the producer, once again, noting that this is a high value, important, event, very large audience, not easy to kind of reschedule and recommunicate, right, externally. And so you're also provided with, like a health analysis, right? So as a producer, as I run the meeting, it'll provide me real-time feedback around the performance of the network, right? So, how well, am I connected, in a spot where there's potentially congestion? It'll provide me with information on my camera resolution or otherwise. So this over here, more so to inform the producer, listen, you want to make sure that you're well connected ahead of the actual event itself, right? Now, once this meeting, finalizes, right, very easy for the producer to simply click on the end button, right? So right below Satya's face there, we can click the end button, and that would effectively end the live event, right? And at this particular point in time, in the back end, we are wrapping up the recording, we're wrapping up the Q&A, we're wrapping up the transcription. All of these assets are being put together for the producer and the team to share out or repurpose or reuse after the event. And then I simply click leave in the upper right-hand corner, and that's it. That's me having successfully produced an event. I did want to just include this one item here around presenting a live event, just to kind of remind the audience around how simple this actually is, right? So the previous experience was the producer. This view over here is the actual presenter, right? And so as I move through this over here, you'll actually see that's the same intuitive Teams UI that any person, familiar with Teams meetings, is familiar with, right? So very important for your presenters. The learning curve is extremely low, right? In terms of they would just join the meeting, turn on the microphone, turn on the video, share their content, and then they could very easily then join and present into live event, right? So very low bar, very simple presentation experience inside of live event. And then as far as the attendees is concerned, right, so let's kind of walk you through the attending of a live event. And so once again, we show you the Teams calendar, but this could have been your Outlook client or your Gmail client or something similar. Open up the specific item, kind of review. There's the content we put together earlier, right? There's the invitation and the description of the event. And so at meeting time, all I do as an attendee is simply click on the Watch Live Event, and then it launches this specific UI, right? So this would be the attendee view inside of live event. Now, very important for you, if you look towards the lower rail of the meeting, right, you'll see on the left-hand side, there's a pause button, right? So live event supports DVR. So a specific user, an attendee inside of live event can actually pause, fast forward, or rewind a live event, right? So if I wanted to, go downstairs quickly and grab a cup of coffee, I could pause my live event, and then when I come back up again, I can, push play, and then I go live into the specific event, right? On the right-hand side, two other important items there, CC and the settings gear. This is how your attendees would select to enable the closed captioning or enable the translated closed captioning inside of live event, right? So a very simple UI for them. And this experience would be very similar for a person on a desktop, on a Mac, even using a browser or using the mobile client to join a Teams live event. And then on the upper right-hand side, you see the little chat button there, the Q&A. If I click on Q&A, right, you'll see we actually pop out the Q&A into the attendee experience. And there you can see, right, we provide the attendee with a very simple Q&A box, right? And so in this case over here, attendees can ask questions of the presenters, and they can ask those questions either as the person that has joined this specific live event, or they can actually post those questions as anonymous, right? And so a great amount of control around around acknowledging the questions, right, approving those questions, and then specifically replying privately or sharing those questions publicly within Microsoft Teams live event. And that's pretty much it. That's the attendee experience inside of live event. The next item I want to take you through, right, is kind of how to produce, in live event when using a custom encoder, right? So in many cases, many of our customers already have quite a large, internal AV team, right, that may have one or two facilities, right, where they potentially have high definition cameras. Maybe they have ceiling mounted microphones. If you're already spoiled, wonderful green screen environment, right? But you can actually take that composite view, right, of multiple cameras, multiple video feeds, multiple microphone feeds, and actually bring that into live event, right? And so you'll see on the right-hand side, these are the compatible encoders that we have tested with live event. And so the idea would be that you would connect all this hardware through a mixer, like as an example, a TriCaster, right, or a Blackmagic's a unit as an example, and you would then pipe that content into live event using one of these software utilities, right? And so very similar workflow again as the producer in this case, join the meeting, but now at meeting startup there, I'm actually going to integrate my encoder into this specific live event, right? So you'll see on the right-hand side, we actually have the server ingest URL, right? This is the RTMP feed from that specific encoder. We plug that into the Teams client, and then when we're ready, we connect the encoder. And you can see over there, in this case over here, you can see high fidelity video and audio feed brought into live event powered by Microsoft Stream, right? So a slightly different workflow, right? We're not, in this case, using a laptop with a webcam and a headset or otherwise. We're actually using some high fidelity audio and video gear and bringing that composite video feed into live event and into Stream. And so when I click start, you can see over here, there we go, high fidelity. This is such a running, in live event, right? You can see over here, once again, on the left-hand side, live feed, very simple controls for the producer to kind of manage, to first and foremost understand that the event is being recorded, it's live, and once the event has completed, very easy for him or her to end the event. Also some great analytics here. So at any one point in time, the producer can actually have a view of the concurrent viewers, right? So how many folk right now are joined via this specific live event? Once again, just some data around that. And when I'm done, I would just click on end. And once again, when I click on end, it would now go and wrap up. It would compile the recording and save the recording. It'll capture all of those meeting artifacts and then make those available to me at the end of the meeting. The one item that Michael had hinted to, at the beginning of this call, though, right, is that you can also produce a live event inside of Yammer, right? So thus far, we produced a live event in Teams, right, using either Teams or using an encoder. But you can see over here, very simple for you as well to go and schedule and book and create and produce a Teams live event, a live event directly within Yammer. And so if you wanted to, as it were, deliver these high power, high value, impactful live events and bring them closer to your communities, right? This is another way for you to very easily bring large scale production of meetings into Yammer. In terms of post-event resources, we spoke about the fact that at the end of live event, right, we provide you with a composite view. And so here you can see at the end of the meeting, as the producer or the organizer, I can browse back to the event, and you'll see there I have now the recording available to me. I have the Q&A report. I have the attendee engagement report, and I have the transcription of the meeting, right? So one place for me to, as it were, go and collect, access, and download potentially any one of those meeting assets. So Michael, I want to pass this back on to you in terms of sharing with the team some best practices around live events.
Thank you, Mornay. And folks, we've got lots of great questions in there. Mornay, I know there's some government questions, which I know is dear to your heart, that maybe you can take a look at on some features. Folks, we're trying to get to as many answers in the questions as we can, so keep them coming. I also put in earlier in the session a URL around the resources for live events. And I just want to highlight that's all our current guidance, and it's getting updated regularly. So do check that resource link I posted early into the event. And there's also, I want to highlight in there, we're offering a free service right now for live events assistance. So if you're getting ready to start doing your own live events, again, we encourage you to practice this a couple times with your producers and presenters, but also when you're getting ready to do your real live event and go live, put a request in with Microsoft to help and have us provide assistance for you. You want to get that request in about 2 weeks in advance if possible, and we'll help you with making sure everything's set up correctly and looks good for your live event that you're going to run. So let's just go over, again, a few best practices here around live events. Again, so first of all, and I saw plenty of questions around this too. Make sure your policies and permissions are set ahead of time. If we reiterate a couple things, you don't need too many producers, and you also want to have the right amount of presenters. Not everyone needs to have all the producer rights in running a live event. So consider the roles for the producers and presenters ahead of time. I saw a couple questions on, hey, when do I use Stream versus Teams live event? One thing I'll mention here, if you'd like to get some more perspective beyond just this session we did here, all of our on-demand sessions from Ignite 2019 are available to watch. And there's hours and hours of content of Microsoft live events, Stream, Yammer live events, etc. And if you want to get some other information and insights into choosing the platform that's right for you, do check out some of those on-demand recordings from Ignite 2019. The other best practices are, thinking about ahead of time. Where's the recording going to go? How's that going to be distributed afterwards around the engagement for that recording and questions? So again, organizing and preparing a couple times ahead of time and getting that ready, and thinking about the next piece that we get a lot of questions on is, how do we invite everybody to this? So as Mornay went through, you're going to have an attendee link to share with folks. Quite often we'll see someone from corporate communications or the training department or an executive admin really own the invite to that live event. Or you can produce it somewhere within Teams and use a short URL to get that invite out for everybody. And you don't want to be having to manage some long URL, and you definitely don't want to have, don't think about traditional means of forwarding a meeting. That's not what you want to do in this case. You want to make sure that attendee link is just published one time and it's out there. Saw some other questions around licensing. It's really going to depend on your own situation. Teams live events is part of most likely your Teams license bundle already today. It's inside of that Teams licensing. There's some additional questions we saw around PSTN calling. That's all going to come down to what your licenses are, again, around your specific scenario for call-in. And just a reminder, not everybody needs to call in everywhere. We're seeing, especially in current times, just people joining from home without having to incur costs on PSTN licenses. This service scales out and may give you the opportunity to reduce some costs in that regard. Next slide, please, Mornay. Okay, so the other stuff here, just on the equipment side, right? There's some best practices, kind of common sense stuff here. Just make sure you've done some tests around the microphone. You can do some of these tests ahead of time. Make sure you run those. If you're going to be doing Lots of video and presenters. Think about the lighting in the scenario, the placement of the camera where that's at. Again, make sure you're practicing. Make sure you do a dry run. Think about your content. There were some questions around can we share multi-windows, right? Think about you can share content like we're sharing a PowerPoint slide today. We could also be doing desktop sharing for demos. We can also have some video pre-made, have it in stream, have it a video just through the Windows video recording for a demonstration. There's lots of options to share both your static file content, but also that video inclusive inside of this, whatever is the right scenario for you. And then, of course, we've got partners. And if you're getting into bigger production around and need help with networking and delivery of really going kind of higher production on your live events, we've got partners in this space that specialize in that regard and can extend a live event from where it's at today. Hey, Mornay, let me turn it back to you for a second. Any questions that you're seeing in the queue? I see our questions just keep going up, and this is great. Anything that you might want to call out from the questions that you've seen that you can help answer?
Hey, Michael, I haven't looked at the questions yet. I'll look at them in a second. Do you want to just get onto the last slide? Hey, folks, just before we kind of break away from this slide, just to reiterate what Michael said, right? Practice, 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 right? Make sure that you prior to producing your high, one of these large meetings, make sure that as a team you've met up before, you've actually run the service internally, maybe within your department, and make sure you are familiar with kind of how to join, produce, present the event. And then also on day of event, make sure you join early. Just make sure that you have enough time to debug any issues you may have with microphones, cameras or anything, like that.
Very good. So go ahead, Mornay.
Yeah, in terms of follow-up, obviously we spoke about the fact that we've produced the event now. We had a massive turnout. What we want to do is we want to capture the Q&A. Potentially there are some follow-up actions, right? Maybe we need to share some content with the field. So make sure that you always review the Q&A and file that accordingly. Also, publishing the recording for the attendees, right? So once again, some folk may or may not have made the event. So do make sure that you pull the recording and then store it. If you have an internal video library like Stream or similar, make sure that you post the recording there. And then obviously it's always nice to thank the audience for their participation. So Michael, do you want to just go through the questions? I'm actually going to stop the presentation, right? And then we can actually go and take the Q&A.
Sure. So we've got dozens and dozens of questions here that some we've answered and some that are just coming in. And I'll tell you what, I'll try to answer a couple questions here live, and then Mornay, I'll give you a chance to scan through the Q&A as well. There's a couple specific GCC questions. So here's a question from Colin asking about what roles do the producer and presenter have on the webcast? Right. So again, if you think about the producer is really that person behind the curtain. They see all the presenters that they're managing, kind of all the presenters' views, the content, and they're going to be able to start and stop this live event. So you want to have at least two people have the role of producer, just to make sure that you've got a backup that someone can start the event and stop the event. That's very important. But you might wind up having more presenters. Maybe it's someone that's just coming in to just speak for a portion of the event, or they're only going to present a specific area. So you may wind up having 2 or 3 to 4 to 1 presenters to producers. And hope that gives you some clarity. And there's some specific, in the guidance we published, there's a good grid of matrix of what the rights for the producers and presenters are. But think about those more in the form of what's their activity going to be on a live event as well. And I think that hopefully answered a couple. There's also a question around How do we see attendees that join the event? There's two pieces to that, right? You can have, there's different security you can set up for the live event. So you could choose to have, this will be an event that everyone in your company can see, or you can restrict it to certain folks within the AD in your company, or it could be a public event. So the attendee report is going to populate also based on who attended and some of the security that you've set up ahead of time. Ornay, any questions you want to take here?
Yeah, so maybe instead of replying to them once off, we'll certainly get back to this, right? But will there be a polling feature in the future? Absolutely, right, Michael? So we can share that we are busy working on bringing a polling feature into live event. I'm trying to look for some more questions over here. What is the dial-in restriction for the government license, right? So Brad, by default, obviously, your attendees are going to join the external meeting, right, which is a composite audio, video, and content view, and actually access that, via the internet, right? So there's no specific dial-in for the attendees into live event. We have in the past cobbled together some really interesting workarounds. I'd suggest you reach out to your local Microsoft account support specialist to kind of speak to where we could provide some of these additional functions inside of live events.
Hey, Mornay, do we want to go over to let's go take a look at some of the published events as well, or the published Q&A, just to review those for everybody, where I think we've got a lot.
Okay. Right. Are there any guidelines on when to use streams versus teams for live events? I think, Michael, you answered that there. There is some content online there. But really, if you think about teams, the idea would be very simple, right? Democratizing large-scale webinars, right? So a very simple UI for you to go out and create, produce, and run these events. Typically low bar to entry, right? So in this case, have a laptop, with a webcam and a microphone, can produce webinar, right? Where with Stream, as an example, you may want to bring in a production facility and share high quality audio, high quality video. Maybe you want to splice in a couple of videos, maybe a custom video streams or otherwise, right? That's potentially where Stream, is valuable, right? And not to say you can't do that in live events, but that's kind of where I would see folk using Stream as opposed to Teams. Can Teams be sent to or integrated with WebEx or Zoom? So today's specific event is around live event. There is a roadmap for us whereby Teams meetings per se would be able to integrate with WebEx and Zoom, but in as far as live event is concerned, there's no need for the audience member to actually join the session through WebEx or Zoom. How many video streams can be added to the introduction, right? So 10, right? So the internal production stage, right? So the internal presentation crew could be up to 250 unique speakers, right? But you can only present up to 10 active video feeds at any one point in time, including the producer, right? So the producer can actually switch between any one of 10 active video feeds inside of the Teams. Now, what you're seeing right now actually is a composite view of 4 folk in the meeting, and I can actually go and turn on my camera just to give you you can see me at the bottom there, hi, right, near reality under COVID-19, presenting from home. But you can actually have 4 active videos, shared into live event at any point in time. I'm going to just turn off my camera for a second, right? Can you address restrictions for government license types? So there really are no restrictions in GCC, right? So you don't want to get too much into licensing, but the core base government license should allow you to create and produce live events. It's very important, though, that bear in mind that it might be that your IT organization has only permitted certain folk within the business to create live events. So reach out to your internal IT organization to find out if they have extended to you or your department or your agency the ability to book and host Teams live event sessions. Michael, do you see any other question that we?
Yeah, there's one other question that I just want to make a reference to. So there's been a lot of questions on questions. So can we do a survey or can we do a poll? Right. So I think the answer is twofold. That feature is a roadmap feature for us to have native polling inside this, but don't let it stop you from using a Microsoft Form survey. So many of you have the licenses for Microsoft Forms. It's very simple to create a Microsoft survey in Microsoft Forms, publish that survey right in the chat or as shared content in the Q&A panel, and then be able to go and show the results live from one of the presenters. So definitely leverage Microsoft Forms to do those surveys today if you can.
Yeah, and I would say, Michael, that's an important aspect of live event, right? Is the whole pre-event excitement, pre-event notification, right? Driving awareness, right? There's the event itself, right? Where you're engaging the audience. And then at the end of the event, obviously, you've got the ability to kind of share out the recordings, share out a composite view of the Q&A, potentially even share out links for completing post-event surveys or otherwise. Many of those features will make their way into the core product, over time. But certainly don't shy away from using some of the other assets you have in M365 to engage with your audience.
Yep, and similarly, I see another question around, can attendees submit questions before the live event? That's exactly the scenario Mornay and I referenced, briefly around the value of using Yammer along with a live event before and after. To give you all an example, and it's well published, within Microsoft, we have a monthly town hall with our CEO, and Yammer's used throughout the entire month before, during, and after that CEO town hall for people to talk about topics at hand, for questions to be answered and posted. And so Yammer can surround the live event by helping with the Q&A, if you will, before and after. So that's another choice that you can make.
Any other questions, Michael, Kevin? Any other questions you need help with?
Yeah, Mornay, here's a question that maybe I ask you to give some perspective. So someone's asking around, what guidance does Microsoft have around network requirements and preparation for a successful event? Can I ask you to speak to some of the common networking preparedness you advise to customers, Mornay?
Yeah, I would say so. Typically so a couple of things to think about, right? Very important for you to factor in who is the audience, right? If the audience is internal to your organization, then know that there's a potential for a large number of outbound connections to a live event, right? And in that case, Michael, what we would recommend is that our customers engage one of our, CDN partners to help them optimize the flow of audio, video, and content across their backend, right? Especially when you start approaching like 10,000 meeting attendees in what could be a high fidelity audio and video production, right? So we do have partners that allow you to optimize those video feeds. Where the audience is external, right? So where this potentially is like in COVID-19 right now, where many folk are working from home, as an example, or where you are presenting to the public, probably less of a concern around the attendees interconnecting with a service, right? Because most of them will connect via their local internet service provider to live event, and so you wouldn't have to design or scale out your network for that, which kind of takes me back to the presenter and the producer. We certainly want to make sure that they are well connected, right? In other words, if you can be hardwired, be hardwired. If you're not hardwired into the network, make sure that you have a strong Wi-Fi signal, and that you're not typically trying to present this from, say, the cafeteria, where there would be massive contention for bandwidth, right? I think our planning guidance in as far as this deck is concerned, right, is certainly for the producer and the presenter. Let's at least make sure that we are planning for at least 10 megs worth of speed when presenting these events.
Hey folks, so one other thing, that just as we're starting to wrap up here and we're coming to time, we want to make sure, thank you so much. We had over 400 people attend this today, and still lots of questions pouring in, so we know this is important to you. If you're not familiar with it, please be sure to visit us on Microsoft.com. We've got a site called User Voice, and User Voice is where we want to hear back from all our customers about which features you need us to either add to our products or improve in the product. And there's some requests coming in, both on roadmap questions and also capabilities. We literally are designing Microsoft Teams and live events and the features based on what we're hearing from our customers and what they need to be successful around this. So please get out there on User Voice. You can search for additional requests others have made. You can vote on them. And we are literally engineering product requests. For example, I saw some questions around when are we going to increase the 2x2 view of live participants. It's a very popular question. We're working on that to improve that this year. This is how we build the experience that you want to have. So please go out there and use your voice and vote.
Well, Michael, great. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful engaging with the audience again. Hopefully today, left you a little more knowledgeable in terms of live event, where it factors into our ecosystem of meetings, right? And now you'll feel a little more confident in terms of going out there, producing, scheduling, producing, and running live events, both within your organization as well as to your customers.
Ornay, thank you very much. Thanks to all our helpers, Kevin behind the scenes on the Q&A panel. And folks, we really appreciate you attending this today, and hope you have got some questions answered and feel confident going forward and practicing with a live event and running it in your own organization. Thank you so much.